Hey watch friends, today we're going to check out the latest from a micro brand MMI, and this is from their Turret series, specifically the Chronograph V2. In case you missed it, recently featured a full review of the GMT version, and while certainly there are some obvious similarities, there are as many differences as there are similarities. Let's go ahead and unpack those. First, as far as administrative matters, this is currently live for ordering on their website. I'll of course have a link down the video description. The pricing is approximately $421 US, and that is of course converted, so check that out as far as real time there. As far as the basic specs, the warranty on this is a 1-year warranty. The case, measured from roughly the 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock position on my calipers, is coming in pretty much dead on at 40 millimeters. I got 40.1 millimeters. The bezel is also pretty well flush, coming in at 39.9 millimeters. Just like on the prior one, the lugs are a strap change friendly 22 millimeters. The lug to lug is a relatively compact 47 millimeters. The thickness is thicker than the prior, however we'll talk about this as we go through. This is coming in at 14.2 millimeters, but that is including this fairly highly domed, and this is a double dome sapphire crystal, which actually features 10 layers of inner AR coating. As far as the movement, this is definitely a change from the GMT version. This is coming with a Seiko Mecha Quartz, specifically the VK67A. So you're going to get the benefits of quartz as far as grab and go and always set and ready to go, but as far as for the chronograph, you will get the mechanical portion that comes into play for that chrono if you're not familiar with those, and we'll of course check that out as we go through. The water resistance is stepped down from the GMT. It's coming in at 100 meters or 10 atmospheres. The weight's another interesting area. So despite the fact that this is a little bit thicker, the weight actually is reduced and it's coming in at 152.5 grams. So 152.5 grams, and that is on this bracelet sized to my 6.5-inch wrist. And that's definitely welcome for me. One of the critiques I had with the prior is I wanted it to go on a bit of a diet, and I got to experience that here with this one because it is a little bit lighter. Alright, so now that we have the basic specs, let's get a better feel for what this one's actually like to live with, all the quirks, those kind of good things. First, for the colors. This one is only available in 2 different color options. There's what they refer to as the Bismarck Yellow, which is kind of a yellowish orange that we're looking at today, and then there's additionally an Ice Blue variant. Both of those are full lume dials, really have nice presence both day and night. Just as we saw with the prior version, or with the GMT version rather, this has what I would describe as like a satiny sherbet kind of dial to it. It does have a nice satin shimmer, and it really walks the line between that yellowish orange or orangish yellow, depending on how you want to characterize it, and we'll check it out next to a more traditional yellow dial here shortly. One of the main things you're going to notice, and it's a signature of the Turret series, is as you look towards the perimeter, you can see that this does have their signature disc style date. So it is like a pointer date functionality there. You do have that orange accent, which shows you what date it is, and that really, like I said, has become a signature for the Turret series, carrying over to almost all of the versions that they have. Being a chronograph, this does have 3 subdials. You're going to see at the 12 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 6 o'clock. Specifically at the 12 o'clock position, you're going to see it does have your chronograph elapsed minutes. Down at the 6 o'clock position, it does have your primary second, and that does tick away given that this is a quartz for that primary function. And then at the 9 o'clock position, you have your chronograph elapsed hours. Additionally, though, you're going to have printing on the dial. Of course, on the subdials, you can see that it does have the color variation changing from white on the blacks over to black on the yellow portion. And then you do have the brand name as well as some other text at the 9 o'clock position. And then as you move out towards the perimeter of that center disc, this is where you'll have your hashes as well. So you do have 4th scale for your minute and second legibility and precision there. And this is one of the things that does definitely change up as far as overall aesthetic compared to the GMT version, is this does actually have that kind of step down as opposed to just a cut in. And I really like the look of this, where it kind of sandwiches in with that yellow, then the black ring, and then as you move out to the perimeter, you can see that this does have a rehaut, which does feature a tachymeter, again in keeping with the chronograph styling. As far as the handset, this is going to be different than the GMT as well. So this actually now features polished hands that are kind of like a sword style, and they do have facets on them as well. So as we look at this in different lighting conditions, you can see the light does play off of that. It's a little bit subtle for that accent, but it is one that's definitely welcome. Just as on the prior version, this one you can see does have an arrow for your, what I guess we'll call primary. So in the 3-hand configuration, it's actually your chronograph second. That's a very traditional arrow, not like a pointer style arrow, but actually like a true bow and arrow. You can see on the counterbalance, it does have like a feather tip, and then you can see the arrow tip out towards the edge there. And that of course does function kind of like a lollipop, and it is loomed as well. And then as you move through, that of course is an accent color there. Then when you look at the subdials, you can see those carry through with the accent color as well, and that is going to be consistent across all 3 of those subdials. As you shift out to the markers, you can see that this does have pentagon markers. Those are also going to be polished and do have lume that we'll check out here momentarily. You'll notice that with the subdials, they are absent at the 12, 6, and 9 o'clock position. However, they're present throughout the rest of the dial. Shifting over to the lume pattern is going to be relatively similar to what we saw on the prior. Other than the dial layout change, you can see that this thing just glows like a torch. It's a mix of a BGW9 as well as C3, and that full lume dial, just as we saw on the prior version, really glows quite strongly. No complaints there, plenty of endurance, and it's really going to be quite bright day or night. And that's one of the things that's neat too, especially with this orange version, though it does carry over for both of the full lume dials, is it really does, as it shifts from kind of day, so if you're in transitional lighting, as it shifts from the day to the lume kind of effect there, it's really subtle, much more so than most others because the coloration is so similar between the day color as well as the night color. And that's a really cool accent and touch there. And then as you look at the crown, you can see that this one is loomed here as well. As far as the bezel, this one is going to be very similar to the other version, and this is a 120 click unidirectional bezel. We'll check out the action here momentarily, as that was one of my critiques, and I have a kind of caveat and note for that. But first, as far as the construction, you can see just like the prior one, it's kind of nested down into the case. You can see it has a traditional coin edge. It additionally is going to have a noticeable slope between the case and the crystal there. And then as far as the bezel insert, this is again a polished ceramic insert. As we already saw, it does have C3 for your numerals. It is a dive style configuration, hence the 120 click unidirectional for that. But getting back to the action, I had an issue on the prior one, which I let you all know and you saw on camera as well. But let's go ahead and check this out. As you can see, this is significantly improved here. So just as I expected at that time, that I think was a one-off issue where that one was kind of binding up for it. This one does not have nearly as much backplay. So as you can see, not anywhere near as much wiggle, nor is it as challenging to manipulate. One thing that I will say that does carry through is because this is a relatively thin coin edge, it is kind of tough to grip a hold of because it's flush and it's thin and it's actually set back slightly. I said flush there, but it's close to flush. I find that it's easier if you kind of press in from the top and squish that, but of course, as a result, you do get fingerprints while you're going through there as well. But all that is to say, as I expected at that time, that was likely a one-off and probably an issue with that particular bezel where that was kind of locking up on it. So that is definitely a welcome relief there. Shifting over to the case on this is going to be very similar to the prior version. Specifically, you're going to be looking at a fairly slab kind of construction. It definitely is on the chunkier side as far as the overall visual aesthetic, and again, is going to be very similar to that last one. You can see that this does have downturn to the lugs, comes relatively flush with the case back. The primary finish is going to be vertical brushing. I'm generally partial to horizontal brushing. However, I think this works well enough on this particular style as well. As you look at the lugs, you can see this once again does have compound cut. So as we already saw, it cuts in for the bezel. That leaves that exposed there. Cuts up around that. Almost functions kind of like a crown guard, but for the bezel itself. And then you have the angular cuts that come down from there. And that's a cool accent and touch. And as you can see, it does again carry through with that polish, which breaks that up and visually I think is pleasing. Shifting over to the lugs, you can see once again, very similar lug shape, if not the same. It's going to have the chamfer cut and a relatively, given the kind of stoutness of the case, relatively thin for the lugs, but I think they're well proportionate to it. Once again, you're going to have curve in between there, fitted end links, and we'll check that out further as we look at the bracelet itself. On the crown side, you can see this one, of course, does change it up. The basic construction as far as the crown with having its integrated crown guards is going to carry through. But what you can see here is given that this one is going to be a chronograph configuration, you do now add your pushers at your 2 o'clock as well as your 4 o'clock position. And that's one of the changes that we see compared to the original version, is these actually are screw down pushers now. So we'll check that out here momentarily as far as manipulating those, but those do actually lock for that, which is pretty cool. The crown itself is coming in at 6.8 millimeters, and it once again is a screw-in configuration. As we already saw, this does have a coin edge, and it is both signed and loomed on that. And then the finishing is going to be principally brushing for that, other than obviously those accents we just saw. As far as the crowns themselves, or the pushers rather themselves, as we already saw, these are a screw-out configuration, so you actually have to unscrew those to be able to depress. At the top in the 2 o'clock, you're going to have your start-stop function, and then down at the 4 o'clock position, that's going to be for your reset as well. That's a pretty cool touch there, and not something you see that commonly, but I do like that. Functionally, it does add a little bit of a complication to actuating the chronograph function, but that's by design and intention. Shifting over to the case back, the case back is going to be basically the same as we saw previously. So this is once again going to be a relatively simplistic case back. You can see it is a screw-in configuration, predominantly going to be brushing, does have their text kind of milled in as well as their logo into that, and then it's going to be the circular brushing for the primary finish of that. Shifting over to the bracelet. The bracelet on this is again going to be similar if not the same as the other version. So this is coming with a taper of 22 millimeters at the lugs down to 20 millimeters at the clasp. So it does wear definitely on the thicker side, especially for being a 40 millimeter watch. I'd say that's more in keeping with most 42 millimeter bracelets. And that is something that I personally would have preferred to have a little more of a taper and a little more thinness and slimming for that. But we'll check that out and talk about that further as we get to the critique section. As far as the configuration, just as we saw on the prior one, here it is on my 6.5-inch wrist, and you can see that this does have FIMO end links, so it drapes without any issues or problem there. The links themselves are, again, in H-link configuration, and they are going to be brushing on all surfaces for that. Once again, this does feature screws to get this sized up, and if you don't already have one, I'll have a link to a quality screwdriver down in the video description. Highly encourage you to pick one up, as well as a how-to video, Loctite, all that kind of good stuff. But these screws are definitely very much on the larger side of any that I have encountered. 1.2 millimeter screwdriver still works just fine for it. However, it can fit larger, I believe 1.4 or 1.6 for that, should you have one on hand. On the back, you are going to once again have quick release spring bars, so if you want to change that over to a strap, no problems there. As far as the articulation, once again, just like we saw on the previous one, for being a relatively chunky bracelet, it actually doesn't have bad articulation at all. Really can't complain there. It drapes plenty nicely for the wrist, or across the wrist rather. It is just going to feel like a chunkier bracelet because it is a chunkier watch overall. And then as far as the clasp, again, this is going to be very similar here as well. So you have a fold-over keeper for that, and then once you pop that open, you do have a traditional double pusher. It is going to be principally brushed, though you do have some polish accents as well in their signature. On the interior, you can see it does have a milled bridge. And then when you flip over to the side, you can see that this does have your traditional micro adjust holes there as well. So unfortunately, no toolless micro adjust on this version either. All right, so now hopefully you have a better feel for this model, how it differs, how it's similar, all that kind of good stuff. But let's go ahead and bring in some comps and get a better idea as to how this stacks up. So first, as promised, this is a somewhat more traditional, this is still kind of a mustardy yellow, but this is the RZE Endeavor. And you can see this coloration, I think it pulls out more of what I refer to as kind of the orangish coloration of this. You can see this one in and of itself, to me, does have some definite orange and, like I said, mustardy kind of color here, but you can see this is even more so, and that just gives you an idea of sizing. This is a 40 millimeter here as well, and you can see with having that kind of inlaid dial does definitely wear and read smaller. Next up, here it is next to a larger watch, and this is kind of going in the opposite direction. So this is the Zelos Hammerhead, Hammerhead 3 in titanium. And as you can see here, this one's a 44 millimeter case. However, it does have a smaller dial. And as you can see, in terms of overall presence, I think the case presence of this, for being a 40, it's a pretty large presence watch, partly owing to kind of the overall chunkiness of that, which as you can see next to the Hammerhead, which is definitely not a thin watch by any means, it still reads relatively chunky because this one has kind of that undercut and that stuff going on. But this just gives you an idea as far as dial presence, how much presence this has. To me, it really reads closer to a 42 millimeter watch, and that's especially true with having this chunkier bracelet. And then here it is next to a 42. This is next to the Revolot Hex Mariner, and this is the 42 millimeter rather version of that. And again, it just gives you an idea here. You can see smaller dial presence, but the case itself, I think, really does look fairly comparable to that 42. So it just gives you an idea there as sizing. This one's one of those ones that's a little bit tough to pin down because it has aspects that certainly it is supportive of the 40 millimeter spec, but it does, I think, in many respects read and wear like a 42 millimeter would. All right, so there you have it. Let's go ahead and wrap things up with my personal view of the positives, critiques, as well as the summary. Many of these are going to overlap, but there are some definitely significant changes. So first, for the positives, this is once again, it's a stout, in even more so, grab and go kind of watch. So with being a quartz here, this one is going to be more of a true grab and go rather. So as the prior one was certainly had the stoutness, had the robust feel for it, this one adds that true grab and go functionality. Having struggle with saying that today. All right, as far as the color, just like on the prior one, I really like the color and I actually like it even more so with having these black accents to kind of tone it down a little bit. I think this really looks great both day and night. Nice, vibrant, warm color, but very fun. I like that a lot. And then this one's going to be a love it or hate it kind of function, but I appreciate it for what it is, and that is their signature date. You know, with this styling, it's definitely not for everybody. Some people I've seen comment in the past that it does turn them off. However, I like the fact that they carry through that cohesive design language through each of their turret lineup. But what about the critiques? You know, with the past one, we talked about the bezel action. Here, thankfully, that has been remedied. But one of the things that does carry over for me is I do wish that they had not gone with the C3 for the bezel and instead gone with a BGW9 to carry over that more white coloration. The green, especially up against this orangish hue, just doesn't really work for me. That's aesthetically, I don't find the most pleasing. Additionally, staying on the color vein, similar to the past version, the accent color. So you can see on the 9 o'clock subdial, they chose to stick with that orange. I wish they would have gone with a black for that, just like they did for the text of changing from the white to the black. I wish they would have changed the hand from that orange to the black. To me, just on this particular version, it does wash out a little bit. Certainly the legibility's there, and it's just fine. I just think it would have been aesthetically more pleasing and more legible had they gone with a black hand for that subdial. Just as on the past version, the end link here, as you can see, it does get that ledge effect, so it kind of drops fairly significantly, and then you get that sharp edge. To me, that always looks unrefined on a Fimo end link if it's not tucked up and kind of nested nicely in there. So that carries through. And then again, just like on the prior version, I do wish that it had been a little bit of a lighter weight, whether they went with a 20mm bracelet or tapered down to 18. One way or another, I would have liked to have seen them lighten that up. And same thing, I would have liked to have seen a toolless micro adjust clasp, especially at around the $420 price point for a Mecha Quartz watch. I think that that's getting to be in the territory where it's become fairly common to have toolless micro. So that I do think is a knock against this particular one when it comes to value, and definitely a function that I really like to have. So where does that leave us? Just like with the past one, you know, this one is a robust watch overall. This one does add the quartz function, and I actually find that despite the fact that, like many of you, I do oftentimes prefer automatic, I really like the quartz in this application, the grab and go nature that it adds to this. And then just like with the past one, I really like the bright day and night effect. No matter when you're looking at this, it's always going to be bold, it's always going to be present, and that's something you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it, but I like this particular coloration, and I like the blue as well. So there you have it. I hope this has been a fun look for you. If you did like it, please do tap that like button. If you haven't already done so, smash that subscribe button. Also, drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Which of the two versions do you like as far as the two dial colors? But additionally, which of the models do you prefer? Do you like the GMT better, or are you happier with this Mecha Quartz version? Thanks for watching.